El Chapo Guzman is considered one of the most notorious criminals of all time. He was prosecuted as the top leader of the Sinaloa cartel and the principal figure responsible for one of the largest drug trafficking operations in the Americas. However, not even his arrest has stopped his son, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, from following the same path of drugs and violence. This is the story of how the arrest of the son of the world's most important drug trafficker led to the deaths of 29 people. Who is Ovidio Guzman Lopez? Ovidio Guzman Lopez was born on March 29, 1990. He grew up in Mexico City and spent 4 years in a school run by the Legionaries of Christ as the son of what was once considered the world's most wanted criminal. He learned from his father how to elude authorities and earn exorbitant amounts of money through drug trafficking. According to a formal indictment, Guzman Lopez had been involved in the drug trafficking business since 2008 when he was still a teenager, and his father was in charge of the business. He also became a high-ranking member of the Sinaloa cartel and terrorized the people of Mexico during El Chapo's absence. Unfortunately, the authorities never suspected that this young man would end up causing the death of almost 30 people. But before analyzing how his arrest claimed so many lives, we need to understand the circumstances that led him to end up behind bars. Let's start by talking about his father, El Chapo, a man of humble origins famous for his acts of cruelty and sadism. According to official records, El Chapo Guzman went to such extremes as hiring a doctor to keep an enemy cartel hitman alive so he could continue torturing him. Other sources say he was famous for burying his rivals alive and locking them up with tigers and lions. That's the kind of man Ovidio learned from. After Chapo's arrest, Ovidio assumed a prominent role in the Sinaloa cartel. Soon after, the U.S. Treasury Department named him a key lieutenant in a Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act. According to the U.S., Ovidio and his brother Joaquín held high-ranking positions in the Sinaloa cartel and oversaw more than a dozen methamphetamine laboratories. Other sources claim that Ovidio also ordered the murder of informants, drug traffickers, and a famous Mexican singer who refused to sing at his wedding. In 2019, the Associated Press confirmed that Guzman Lopez was leading the cartel alongside his brothers Ivan Archibaldo Guzman, Jesus Alfredo Guzman, and Ismael El Mayo Zambada. These men would become responsible for sowing more violence in the streets. However, on October 17, 2019, members of the National Guard succeeded in arresting Ovidio Guzman Lopez in Culiacán. But that victory would not last long. The Battle of Culiacán. After Guzman Lopez was arrested, Mexico's government suffered a crushing defeat. During the 2019 arrest, the cartel unleashed several shootouts in the city, with more than 700 armed gunmen threatening to kill civilians in mass and attack an apartment complex housing local military families. That's why the government had no choice but to release him within hours of his capture. The decision was supported by Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who claimed it would help prevent further bloodshed. But, unfortunately, the exact opposite happened. A month after the arrest, one of the officers responsible for capturing Ovidio was killed. In response, the government froze the assets of Ovidio Guzman and 330 people linked to the cartel in May 2020. But if the authorities wanted to see the drug trafficker behind bars, they should be willing to do something more daring than freezing the cartel's funds. Conflicts break out across the country. Although the government's initial strategy was to start fighting violence with more violence, many cartels saw this as a sign of weakness. As a result, they began to coordinate bolder attacks against security forces. One of the best-known cases is the ambush of October 14, 2019. It was a Monday like any other, hundreds of kilometers from Culiacán, when a convoy of state police was ambushed in Aguililla, Michoacán, by criminals from the Jalisco cartel, New Generation. The confrontation left 13 police officers dead and a half a dozen others wounded. A day later, in the community of Tepochica, Guerrero, another massacre occurred in which a soldier managed to shoot down 14 criminals before being shot dead. As detailed in the Mexico Peace Index 2019, Guerrero reached a rate of 69.58 murders per 100,000 inhabitants. Most of these victims are as a result of organized crime, but it's not just Guerrero. Most of Mexico is engulfed in a violent and bloody war against drug trafficking, which explains why the second attempt to arrest Guzman Lopez ended in another slaughter. Capture of Ovidio Guzman Lopez. In the early morning of January 5, 2023, the government, tired of the Guzman's impunity, launched an operation to bring the son of one of the biggest criminals in history behind bars. If they succeeded in capturing him, they would deal a blow to the morale of organized crime. With the help of the army, the National Guard agents identified that armed people were riding in several pickup trucks in the northwest of the city. Some of these vehicles were hand-armored in the same way the members of organized crime used to do. There was no doubt about it. They had just stumbled upon something big. Upon detecting the situation, the agents surrounded the area to prevent the criminals from escaping. After establishing a siege, the authorities persuaded those in the vehicles to get out with their hands up. Unfortunately, things got out of control again. Without a second hesitation, the criminals opened fire on the National Guards. Despite this, the agents emerged victorious and found Ovidio inside one of the vans. At 6:20 a.m. local time, El Chapo's son was officially arrested. But wait a minute. Does this mean the authorities caught Guzman by accident? Not exactly. According to the Secretary of Defense, the operation resulted from 6 months of surveillance work in the area of the criminal group led by Guzman. During the operation, authorities also seized dozens of firearms, magazines, cartridges, various tactical equipment, and vehicles. As a result, 19 gang members and 10 military personnel were killed. Everything seemed to indicate that the government had won, but the day had only just begun. Around 9 a.m., the municipality's authorities announced the suspension of work activities and invited the population not to leave their homes. Yet, moments after Ovidio's capture, members of his criminal group set up 19 blockades and initiated multiple armed conflicts throughout Culiacán, including Culiacán's Federal International Airport and Military Air Base No. 10. As a result, the arrest led the Sinaloa cartel, once led by the powerful Chapo, to berserk and clash with security forces. Fortunately, the authorities were unwilling to allow Guzman to escape again and stood firm in their decision. Thanks to the efforts of the police, 21 other people were arrested that same day and no civilians were murdered. After the conflict, Ovidio was transferred to the Organized Crime Prosecutor's office in Mexico City in a Mexican Air Force aircraft. Unfortunately, Ovidio Guzman's capture could not have come at a worse time, as it took place just days before US President Joe Biden was scheduled to visit Mexico. If things had gone differently, a conflict between Mexico and the United States could have broken out by accident. What does the future hold for Mexico? Although Ovidio Guzman is already behind bars, some suspect it is only a matter of time before he returns to the streets, especially considering that his father, El Chapo, became famous for his jailbreaks and looked like something out of a movie. For this reason, the US government has expressed interest in taking custody of the criminal and preventing Ovidio from ever being at large again. But why is the US government so interested in what happens on the other side of its border? As you might imagine, most of the cartel's operations also affect American citizens. According to WSB-TV, Mexican cartels have a strong presence in Metro Atlanta, so it's only a matter of time before they expand their dominance to the rest of the country. To prevent organized crime from taking over our borders, the United States is working with the Mexican government to put the brakes on cartel activities. Yet, the capture of Ovidio Guzman is just one step in the right direction. Today, it is estimated that Mexico is home to at least 150 organized crime gangs, making it the fourth most crime-ridden country in the world. So we can only hope things change for the better. But what do you think? Will the arrest of Ovidio Guzman make a difference? We'll be reading your comments in the section below. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.